Dianna Kokoszka is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author, and mentor. In her 13 years as CEO of KW Maps Coaching and Training at Keller Williams Realty International, she played a pivotal role in propelling the company to become the largest and most profitable coaching enterprise in the real estate industry. Dianna is also the creator and author of the KW Bold Experience and Coaching Skills Camp, which helped her company to be recognized as the #1 training company in the world. Her entrepreneurial spirit and industry renown have resulted in many industry honors and awards, including the Stevie Award for the Best Sales Coaching Program, an appointment to the President of the United States Business Advisory Council, Denver Entrepreneur of the Year, and Denver Businesswoman of the Year, which she won multiple times. She is a board member of Growing Leaders, which is a John Maxwell Leadership Foundation organization, and actively participates in the Strategic Coaching Training Program. Her greatest passions, though, revolve around developing leaders and encouraging individuals to recognize and harness their innate potential. Now, anyone who knows Dianna knows that her genuine concern for the welfare of others serves as the driving force behind all her endeavors. Dianna's recently published book, Becoming More, will help you to exponentially enhance your relationships, career, and other areas of life, and also empower you to uplift and inspire the growth of those around you. I'm so excited for our conversation today. Welcome, Dianna, and thanks for joining us on Life Excellence.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to add value today in any way that I'm able.
Well, and I'm certain that you're going to do that today. Dianna, you are a phenomenally successful entrepreneur, business person, coach, mentor, and real estate investor. You wear a lot of hats, and you're not only successful yourself, but you've also been very intentional through the years about surrounding yourself with and learning from others who are also incredibly successful. I wonder, in your experience, what qualities and characteristics do successful people have, and what do they do that causes them to achieve success, both personally and professionally?
Wow, that is such a great question. First of all, we become like the people we hang out with. So birds of a feather flock together, right? Scientifically, they've actually proven this. It's called the phase of entanglement in physics. It's where when we're around people, we take a part of them with us. And a lot of it is the way that they think can actually start being the way that we think. We can take on their characteristics, take on their way of thinking. And so I made it a point, mainly because of my mother and father, that told me that you be careful who you take advice from. In fact, my dad sold tickets to the American Motivational Society, and we would have people like Zig Ziglar, Cavett Roberts, Norman Vincent Peale, many people that have passed on, yet they were at our kitchen table having dinner with us. And Zig Ziglar told me a story once, Brian, where he said, Dianna, I was going to Memphis, Tennessee, and I was a little lost. So I stopped at a service station and I asked the attendant there, he said, hey, can you help me get to where I need to go? He says, certainly. And boy, he told me meticulous directions, which I wrote down, and I followed those directions. Well, when I got to where he said I would be in the town, I was actually 45 minutes further away. See, he meant well, but he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, I'm going to give you some very good advice. Be careful who you listen to. And so I took that to heart. And I started looking and watching, observing people. And Brian, I wanted to know, do I want to be like them when I grow up? Or do I want to be like them in business? And I found people that loved people and used things. And I found other leaders, there were a few, that loved things and used people. And I knew exactly who I wanted to be. And so I wanted to surround myself with the people that I wanted to become like them, because I knew I would. Now, what characteristics did I look for? Part of the things happened when I was writing the book. I wanted to look at attitude and mindset and why they were different. And when I went into mindset, I Googled it. Over 150 different mindsets showed up. Started looking in neuroscience books, talking with doctors, many, many different mindsets. So I went to when John Maxwell interviewed many, many leaders. I was part of what was called an inner circle. It was a mentorship, and this was many years ago, about 20 years ago. And I went back to all those people he had interviewed, and I read through them word for word. What was showing up? What patterns were showing up? And I wasn't that intentional at the time, yet I became very intentional about things that really mattered. Did they have an abundant or a scarcity mindset? Did they have a positive, humble, curious mindset? And those were the people I sought to be like. So therefore, I sought to be around people like that. That's why I attend a lot of the conventions that you attend as well. And we get to be and to see and to experience those types of people with those characteristics.
It's so important the people we're around, isn't it? And I talk, as you do, talk a lot and write about surrounding yourself with success. And you certainly have done that in your own life. And the other thing you've done is that you've become one of those people that that people want to be around and that people ought to be around, because you model a lot of the behaviors that we're going to talk about in this interview. You have such a fascinating background in real estate and life. And as CEO of KW Maps Coaching, you trained and empowered hundreds of coaches and also transformed the careers of probably thousands of real estate professionals. Tell us how you got started in real estate. And then if you could, share how you shifted from real estate agent to investor and then to coach, eventually building the most powerful coaching and mastermind program in the industry, which is really remarkable.
Well, I'm glad that you asked, because anyone listening to this, literally, this will give them so much hope, because I got into real estate. I really couldn't afford a real estate school. And I was up one night with one of my children who was not sleeping. They were sick. And I turned on television to stay awake. Well, Brian, PBS was having an auction. And it was music to my ears when I heard they were auctioning off a real estate school course. And I immediately grabbed my checkbook, and I don't think you should ever have your checkbook do your thinking for you. Only I was in that position of my life that I looked at my checkbook and I could afford $50. I went, $50? This is like a $1,200 course. And yet I could hear my mom and dad in my ear saying nothing ventured, nothing gained. It was 2:00 in the morning. So I thought, why not? I called up, they helped me make the bid. And later that morning, I heard, guess what? I'm going to real estate school. And I was so excited. So I went to school. And once I passed, though, I had another obstacle. See, it was a man's world back in Denver, Colorado, in real estate anyway, back then in the 70s. And I literally went to 12 offices before someone would hire me. And once they hired me, once again, I was so excited that I'd made it that far. And then I woke up the next morning and realized, what did I do? I can't even afford a babysitter. Are you kidding? And so I put my kids in a little red wagon and I started going door to door, meeting people and working to be the realtor of choice, right? And so whoever's listening to this, think about, what is your red wagon? What are you willing to do that a lot of people made fun of me? I didn't care. It was, I wanted to help people. Well, that year I was so blessed. I sold 104 houses. And I like to say I helped 104 families, right? The average agent was helping 5 families, selling 5 houses to 104. Well, people started saying, what did you do? See, no one ever told me you couldn't sell 104 houses. I used to sell home care products, and heaven, I was selling thousands of bottles of home care products every year. So I just assumed you sold a lot of houses, right? So I think a lot of times we allow other people's thoughts to penetrate into our head and literally keep us from doing what it is we desire. Now, I learned you could make a lot of money selling real estate, yet I heard you could actually get rich investing and owning real estate. So I started going in that direction. And it was kind of a game I started playing to where I wanted to buy 10 homes. And when I got to 10, I sold one and paid one off. And I just kept doing that as I would accumulate properties and continually working to pay them off, owning them free and clear. So that got me into the investment. And then, of course, because I had done well, I started doing things like going with Michael Gerber, who I had read the book E-Myth Revisited, became a
Sure.
consultant of his, got certified in his program. And from there, Keller Williams called and asked me if I would like to interview for being taking over the MAPS program. At that point, MAPS was losing money. They had had 4 people there before I went to interview, and I always like a challenge. I love turnarounds, and I figured I could do a pretty good job at it. So I took the job and, of course, grew it to a $500 million company, had 357 one-on-one coaches, 80 group coaches, 57 coaches that went out and coached and trained people in the offices. We had 175,000 people go through the BOLD program, which is what I was known for. It was the first program that ever brought mindset into the real estate business. Up until then, Brian, everything was about, training, sales. It was all about sales. And I brought something different into it, the emotional part of the selling process. What were our people going through? And so I would say I went from not affording a babysitter to becoming a CEO by asking a question: what is not being done in our business that if it were being done would dramatically change the way we do business? I was constantly looking for different. What was missing? Where was the gap? How could I fill that gap? And so that's what I would offer to our listeners today is what could you be doing different that no one else is doing that would dramatically change the way that your business runs?
Well, that's a great story, and that's a very powerful question, and it's one that we can apply not only to our careers, but we can reframe that question just a little bit, just tweak the wording and apply that to even certain areas of our lives, right? What can we be doing in our relationship or relationships that would make a tremendous difference? Or what can we be doing in the area of health that would make more of a difference than anything else? Or what can we be doing in fitness or, again, any areas of life? I love that question. Dianna, as you think back to your days of carting your children around in the little red wagon and all the remarkable things that have happened since then, what are a couple of the biggest takeaways from your incredible career in life?
Now, that's interesting because I discovered that we all have what I call the inescapable storytellers in our brain, right? They live in our head rent-free, and there's 4 of them. I discovered one that I call the devious storyteller. And this is the one that is always telling us what we can't do, what we're not good at. Oh, that's not going to work. Oh, people are going to make fun of you. It talks to us and holds us back with all the negativity that it wants to feed that we're willing to listen to. And of course, it keeps us up at night. We have no solace. It reminds us of the boss's snub at work or something that a friend said, or maybe an argument we had with our spouse, something that our kids said. I mean, it's going all night long making up stories. And this devious storyteller, we want to quiet. The second one, though, is called the flattering storyteller. Now, let me tell you how I learned both of these. See, Brian, it sounds like I did really well all the time. And I got to tell you, anyone that has had a lot of success has had a lot of failure. And one of my failures was that I kind of believed that flattering storyteller at one time. I started believing my own press. I mean, I was selling homes like nobody's business. I was selling more than anybody. I had my own assistant, which in those days wasn't even heard of. I had what was a buyer's agent. We didn't even know what to call him when I brought him on. He showed property for me, and I started building this team that nobody liked teams back in those days. Now they're pretty prevalent. Yet I was always doing things differently. And because I was businesswoman of the year, entrepreneur of the year 4 times, I mean, I was living high. I was making a lot of money. I didn't watch my money. Well, 4 offices that I own, property management, 72 houses. The person was watching my money, only watching it go into their bank account, right? And I woke up one morning with 72 house payments 3 times over because all those homes were going into foreclosure. My bank account was at empty. My car was repossessed. It was not a good time in my life, especially because we didn't have caller ID. So I had to take every phone call because I sold everything, pennies on the dollar, went back into selling. And I'm not against bankruptcy. I just couldn't do it personally. Now, the silver lining of all of that, Brian, is I became a fierce negotiator with the banks and mortgage companies. And I paid all the sellers back. And it actually built my character very, very strong. And I watch my money to this day. But see, that flattering storyteller got me in trouble, and the devious storyteller wanted to keep me down. Now, there was a third storyteller that I developed, and that was called the reasonable storyteller. Oh, that was the one that could give me reasons as to why it happened. It gave me excuses as to why it happened. Only my dad had always taught me that when you point the finger that way at somebody or something, there's 3 of them pointing back at you. So odds are 3 to 1. It's your own fault. Take responsibility and move on. And that's when I discovered the best storyteller of all. That's the empowering storyteller. And I learned that not only did I need to empower myself and take a stand for my own greatness, I needed to take a stand for others' greatness. And I needed to stand for their greatness more than they would stand for their limitations. And I did that by empowering others. And it's such a great feeling to go from success to significance where you're helping other people. You're feeding them, you're helping them grow. And when I stepped down from being CEO, and over a year or so, 22 of the people that had worked with me had stepped away. 21 of them literally took leadership positions in other companies. And that just thrilled me because Billy Hornswell said that the best success that he ever had were those of other people. And I love that statement. Successes of other people that you helped along the way, that's the best success that you can ever have in your life, right? So I hope that helps somebody out there. Which storyteller are they going to listen to?
Oh, it definitely does. Those are great stories. And each of those 4 stories are present in all of our lives, right, at different times. And so it reminds me a little bit of the story of the wolf. And I won't go into the whole story, but the punchline is which one wins? And it's the wolf that you feed, right? And so it's the same with the story. Which story are we going to allow to be the dominant story in our lives? And also your definition of success is terrific, measured by how much we help others to be successful rather than just holding that in or achieving it ourselves. I love that. Dianna, we've known each other for several years, and through our mutual friend, John Maxwell, of course. And there are 2 things I've always admired about you. And everybody who knows you would say this too. 1, you're always learning. And secondly, you're deeply committed to adding value to people. And you just talked about that in your definition of success. These values are also very important to me. And I wonder, where do those values come from for you, and why are both so important?
Well, I think the adding value started when I worked in my mom and dad's grocery store. Literally, when I was 5 years old, I was over the magazine rack. And when a gentleman would come in and pick up a car magazine, I would find any other magazine that had a car on the front of it and said, if you like that one, you ought to buy these too, right? Adding more. When I went to the cash register, as people would come through, if they had ice cream, I would say, oh, do you need chocolate topping or caramel or whipped cream and nuts to go with that ice cream? Or how about some cantaloupe, right? In essence, we were taught to add something to people. So it became very natural for me that when in leadership, you're always adding value to others because we value them as people. Now, the interesting part is it didn't come natural for me. I literally, to this day, it started before we even had phones that we could put our calendar in. At 7 a.m., my phone goes off and it says, what will you do today to add value to others? And at 7 p.m., it goes off and it says, what did you do today to add value to others? I used to write it in my calendar, but it was a way for me to literally be intentional about adding that value. It's so important as a leader to serve others.
That's terrific. And I love the putting that alarm in your phone. And there are other things you can do. I use Post-its and just put Post-it notes around that remind me of different things. And even my computer passwords, I add phrases that are either affirmations or just questions that remind me of things. And you think about the number of times you key in a password every day, and every one of those is an opportunity. You could have a random, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you could have a question that's an empowering question or an affirmation that's a powerful statement that helps you to do those things that are important to you. What about the learning piece? Because you are I'm a learner, and that's one of my strengths. And when I look at you and see you learning, and I've seen it many, many times in different settings, you always sit at the front of the room. You're always taking notes, and probably have more notes than anybody else in the room. And I've always thought that I took a lot of notes, but I always see you over there and I say, wow, Dianna, she is the epitome of a learner. Where does that come from? And why is it so important?
So interesting. Well, it's the one thing no one can take away from me. And some of the things I've been through, people can take a lot away from you. They cannot take what you've learned. You have to let them into your mind, right? And maybe that was it. It was something that I felt like, wow, I'm in charge of this. See, I just learned something from you, and I hope our listeners did as well. Put an affirmation and use that as a password. I think that's a fabulous idea. That one little thing, because what we're doing is we're etching that into our brain every time we type that password in. Now, yes. I love the phrase of Gandhi that said, I'm going to learn like I'll live forever and live like I'll die tomorrow. And that's been a phrase I've used. I think it's important because how do you add value to others? We can't give what we don't have. So if I want to add value to you, then I've got to have something to give. And before we started, hearing about the documentaries and everything that were being done, got so excited about learning from those. There's something about knowing something that can help me become better, because I can add value to you and you get to choose if you want to become better or not. Yet you added value to me and I chose, I'm going to go change some of my passwords today because I want to use that. It's such a great learning and that'll help me.
Well, I'm learning so much from you, and I know our listeners and viewers are too. So I appreciate that we're able to add value to you as well. Dianna, your new book is entitled Becoming More, You can't get to better until you get to different. And it's the result, obviously, of years of experience and countless hours of research that I read the book cover to cover and highly recommend it. And it was very clear to me that you were not only drawing from your own experience, but you went out and conducted a tremendous amount of research. And the book is over 300 pages of stories and practical strategies that readers can implement immediately. I'm intrigued by your assertion that we can't get to better until we get to different. Tell us what that means exactly and why daring to be different is essential in order to become more.
I love that question. Albert Einstein said that insanity is just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, if we're going to become better, we have to be different. Otherwise, we'd still be crawling around, right? We wanted to become better, so we learned how to walk. And of course, we fell a lot learning, which a lot of people don't want to fail or do things wrong. They just want to have everything perfectly done. We know that can't be done. Yet, the becoming more needs different in it. Let's look at Blockbuster, Sears, Radio Shack. What do they have in common? I mean, they started to falter. They failed and they faded away because they wouldn't do something different. Blockbuster had the opportunity to actually buy Netflix and said, oh, that's too different. People aren't going to want that, right? And yet, which one is alive and well? Blockbuster's gone. When I put my kids in a little red wagon, people said, that's crazy. Yet it was different. And generally, the people that are different, I was speaking before this podcast and we were talking, Brian, about what happened in the South and the North when football players were coming in and Black football players were outstanding players, but people didn't want to bring them into the South to play. Well, somebody had to take a stand. Somebody had to do something different. With the first girl that went and played Little League Baseball, she was different. Who is taking a difference and making a difference in the world? Those are the ones that are willing to do something different, to speak out different than everyone else, that doesn't have to go along with the crowd, that's willing to say, hey, here I am, and I'm going to take a stand for something that's different. And it may be just a little thing that you do each and every day that makes a difference in your life and helps you become more than you were.
I really appreciate that last thing that you said, because as you were describing these large societal shifts like African-American athletes playing in the South, I was thinking, how can we apply that to our own lives? And I think that last thing you said about just something small that's different and unique. And you think about your real estate career, and you mentioned the little red wagon, but also the buyer's agent and having an assistant and the team's approach. Those were four things that were different, and actually they were ended up being pretty big things, right? In terms of the effect that it had on your career, on your life, the effect that it's had on the real estate industry, because those weren't things that you just kept for yourself. Now, I'm not sure how many real estate agents are carting their kids around in little red wagons, but they're doing the equivalent of that today as they're getting started. But certainly they have assistants, and the team approach, as you said, is very prevalent. And buyer's agents, of course, is also very prevalent. So I love that. So much of your book is about mindset, and you've mentioned mindset a couple times. And I want to explore that a little bit, and deciding how we want to be and who we want to become. I interviewed a little while ago a mental performance coach named Brian Kane. And one thing that he said really stuck with me. Much of his work is in athletics with professional athletes, elite athletes, but he also has business clients. But he indicated that 80 to 90% of athletic performance is mental. But if you ask an elite or a professional athlete how much time they invest in the mental aspects of performance, whether it's in practice or training or education, it's less than 20% of the time. And I thought that was really interesting. And it also, of course, applies not only to athletics, but also to other professions. Why is how we think and the stories that we tell ourselves so important? And what can our listeners and viewers do to reframe and position their thinking for growth, abundance, success, and making a difference in the world?
Such a great question. First off, we are finding that we used to say 90% of your success is your mindset. Now they're saying 95% of your success is your mindset, and
Wow.
5% is the skill. So that 95%, how much time are we spending on our mindset? Do we even understand what our mindset is? Because our mindset, it lives in the subconscious area of our mind. Attitude is in the conscious area of our mind. Now, I don't know about you, Brian. Nobody ever asked me as a kid, hey, do you have a positive mindset? They would say, do you have a positive attitude? And so I was intrigued with what the difference was. And I found that an attitude, you can change that fast, right? Yet a mindset, you have to work on a mindset. Your attitude helps you set a goal. It's conscious. Yet your mindset helps you obtain the goal in your subconscious. Because see, you can sabotage yourself if you don't believe you deserve the goal. So how do you get those two in alignment? And I worked to come up with an assessment. The assessment comes with the book right now. Eventually, of course, we're going to charge for it, yet it will tell you the percentage of the liberating mindsets that you hold and the percentage of the limiting mindset. We all have some of each. It's like the law of duality in physics, where you have like heads and tails on a coin, let's say. You can't have a coin without heads and tails. It's just, which one are you going to focus on? Well, the book gives you the assessment, you find out, and then let's say that you're more into a scarcity mindset than an abundant. It will give you 7 different steps that you can take to go from the limiting mindset to the liberating mindset. Little steps you can do every single day that will help you change the way you think in your subconscious mind. You could actually use them as passwords on your computer, right? Those things that you're to do each and every day. And that way we train our brain. One of the things I think people don't understand is they have trained their brain to think the way it thinks right now. For some reason, people think they don't have any control over that. And see, I studied the brain since 8th grade, quite frankly, because my brother and sister both had brain tumors and I wanted to help them. My brother learned how to walk and talk 4 different times in his life. And that's why it was so important for me to understand what was going on in his brain. His tumor was in the reticular activating system and cerebellum, where I learned about that portion of the brain. And my sister's brain was wrapped around the optical nerve in the prefrontal cortex area, the neocortex, and the limbic system. And I learned about how those areas of the brain work together. And you can learn a lot about reading about things like wars, but you learn a lot more by being in the foxhole under enemy fire. And I was literally in that foxhole every day, studying brain scans, looking at things, wondering how I could help them. And it really helped me in my life to understand that people are doing the best they can. We can just help them think a little bit different. And the book Think and Grow Rich is a great book. It's not do and grow rich. It's not, hey, have a lot of stuff and get rich. It's think and grow rich. And I think a lot of people just don't understand how important thinking is. And something came to my heart right now. I hope it helps somebody because it came so strong, is back to that little degree of difference. At 211 degrees, water can make you hot tea, can make you the instant soup, can do a lot of things. But at 212 degrees, it can make steam. And that steam can take an ocean liner around the world. So just that one little degree of difference every day, adding to our thinking, adding to our learning, adding to whatever it is that we're doing, can help us change the world if that's what we desire to do.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. It struck me as I was reading the book, the extreme amount of science that you brought into the book, and it makes sense now with your family background and wanting to learn about how the brain works and about things that were impacting your siblings. How did you and that totally makes sense. And if we have health issues in our families or with ourselves, and first thing we start doing, well, of course, now we Google it. You had to do other things and actually look at books and maybe even go to libraries. But of course, now what we do, anytime we have an ailment, we go on to Google and we diagnose it ourselves, right, and figure out how to treat it. At what point did you make the connection between what was going on with your siblings and what happens in the brain, and the recognition that you could apply some of those same strategies and concepts and mindset into other areas of your life? So in other words, not just treating health issues, but actually proactively helping us to create the results that we want to create in our lives.
Well, I think the big thing is when we have a passion to learn, things just come to us. I mean, we find books that we never even thought about. All of a sudden, people are recommending things. And so knowing that I wanted to help my siblings, I had to read a lot. I had to ask a lot of questions. I went to doctors and asked a lot of questions. And one of the things that hit me pretty hard was the fact of a study that Daniel Amen did. It's where they brought in 30 people and they had them write down all the things they were grateful for about 5 minutes. Maybe it was hot water pressure, hot water, a shower, right? Your car, your house. I mean, little things as well as big things. And after about 30 minutes, they waited and they did brain scans. And it showed all the areas of the brain, the cerebellum where we have our intuition lives, our creativity, the learning part of the brain, the neocortex, the limbic system, the amygdala, everything was all lit up, and joy and happiness areas of the brain. And then they took the same 30 people and they had them think about what ifs. What if my dog died? What if I lost my job? What if someone hacked my computer and took all the money out of the bank? What if somebody stole my identity? And then they did brain scans. And Brian, nothing was lit up except for worry, anxiety, stress areas of the brain. And so I learned that by helping people stay in gratitude and thinking about what they were grateful for. Every time when my brother would start having a bad day, he would start texting people of how grateful he was for them. And it was amazing how much better the world got for him and how much easier it became for him. Now, for him to text was challenging because he spoke, yet a lot of people, when he would call me, they'd say, it sounds like some guy that's drunk is calling you. Well, I said, that's my brother and he's not drunk, right? I can understand him. Well, for him to text was challenging because his hand would shake a lot, right? And what you and I could do in 30 seconds may take him 2 or 3 minutes. Now, my sister, the way her brain tumor worked was, we know that from one neuron, a thought fires and it travels along an axon and, it jumps over a synapses and all this stuff and it hits another neuron. But in that pathway of travel, it would stop midstream and she could not connect what she wanted to say. And so it was playing charades with her most of the time, working to figure out. She had the thought, she knew what she wanted to say, she just couldn't connect it. And so I wanted to know, how do all these connections work? How does the science behind it work? How can I help them in little ways to get those things out? And so knowing the creative side of her brain really did work. And so she started drawing. And she actually became a pretty good drawer. She could draw things out and we could figure out what she wanted to say. So there's always something that we can learn and always some way that we can help others learn. I hope this is answering your question, because I know I got a little sidetracked there as I thought about my brother and sister, and God rest their souls. They are just such great, great people. It kind of took me back to some great memories. So thank you for that.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that both on the show and in your book. I think it's wonderful to, it's helpful to have that context. And I think it's so fascinating how a lot of the things that we know in the personal development and in the success world, things that we ought to be doing. But what you did really well in the book is give the why behind it, the science behind it, even in your description just a couple minutes ago, what happens in the brain and the difference between or the effect in our brain when we hold ideas of gratitude or things that we're grateful for when we focus on that. Because when we're focusing on gratitude, we can't be worrying and we can't be anxious or angry. You can't hold those thoughts, those two thoughts at the same time. And gratitude is so very powerful. And so I love the science behind that too, actually, what's happening in our brain that causes that to happen. I think people really appreciate knowing that. Some people, they just want to know what to do and they go do it. And if Dianna says to do it, then they'll do it and take it at face value. And other people, of course, want to know that reason why and really understand that. And I think for all of us, it really helps to understand what's going on between our ears, right? Not just know that if we do certain things, then we'll get certain results. And if we don't do those things, then we shouldn't be surprised when we're not getting the results that we want to achieve. So I appreciate that. We talked about failure earlier, and you address this in your book. And failure, Dianna, is something that most people try to avoid, as you know, but you maintain that success and failure aren't opposites, but rather they're, and I'm quoting from your book, a 2-lane road side by side. Would you share more about that? Because I think the role failure plays in becoming more is often misunderstood. So most of us want to avoid failure at all costs. And so, of course, what we do is we don't do anything. And that's not the right approach either.
Well, that's true. We can literally be holding ourselves back, thinking that perfection is the way to go. And no, we have such high expectations sometimes of ourselves. Yet, to me, when you find a successful person, you're also going to find a big failure. And when you look at all the failures that they had, people generally talk about the successes. I mean, look at sports. They talk about, the winning shots that Michael Jordan made. Yet he's the one that brought to our attention how many times he missed the winning shot, right?
Yes.
And when we see them side by side, like Babe Ruth, wow, he had all these home runs. How many times did he strike out to get those home runs? And that's why I put the adaptive learning model in the book, is we learn something, we implement it, we fail, and then we relearn a better way, and we implement it, and we fail again. It's much like walking. I don't know about you. I stood up and fell back down, stood up, fell back down, stood up, took one step, fell back down. And yet, didn't keep us from walking. Yet somewhere along the line, somebody told us that we weren't supposed to fail. We weren't supposed to fall down. I don't know where that happens. Generally, it seems like about 7 to 9 years old, maybe even earlier nowadays. Yet, why is that? I love, and I, oh my word, I wish I could remember her name right now. A great lady. I think it was the lady that she's over many, many fast food restaurants, and oh my word, I can't think of it. I apologize. I am going to tell you though, her dad every night at the dinner table would ask, "What did you fail at today?" And I thought, what a great question to ask our kids. What did you fail at today? And what did you learn from it? And allow them to understand it's okay to fail. In fact, we encourage them to go out and fail at something. As long as they learn from it, it's not failure. It's when we stop and say, I'm never going to do it again. Now, to me, that's a failure.
That's very well said. And I was thinking about this very topic. I've been with my granddaughter, who's 10 months old, the last couple of days, for the last 3 days. And she's just now learning to walk, and she can pull herself up and stand. And we've been practicing having her take steps. And the interesting thing, and you talked about it, that or children, infants take a couple steps and they fall down, and then they get up and they take a couple steps. Well, not only does that happen, but I'm thinking about, again, it's very fresh in my thinking that after taking a couple steps and falling down, the people all around her over the last 3 days, they didn't say, "Oh, geez, you failed," or "Oh, that was miserable," or "Boy, that was a really poor." We cheered. We cheered every time, right? When she would take 2 steps and fall, and we would cheer, "Yay, that's great!" And we'd set her up again, and she would take 3 or 4 steps, and she'd fall down, and we'd cheer. And so we're actually celebrating that failure, if you want to call it that, in quotes, celebrating that, because we know that the more she does that, the more failure she has, the closer she'll get to walking. And then pretty soon she'll be walking, and then she'll be running right after that. So it's interesting how with infants, we all know that, and we've all been around children. We've all experienced that, the failure, and also the cheers, the celebration of that failure. And yet, as adults, we're hesitant to do the same thing. Or when we do fall down, we don't cheer, right? We don't treat it the same way when we see it in others. We often don't characterize it as, "Oh, that's one step closer to success." We think, "Oh, geez, what a miserable failure," or "Oh, another failed attempt," or "Oh, I really." People expected that to happen, and so it's a confirmation of that. It's interesting, the difference, because they're exactly the same, right? The only difference is how we respond to it, as you said.
Well, as a leader, there was one time, you just brought back a memory, where a gentleman had made a big mistake, and it was tens of thousands of dollars. And he was going around saying, "Oh my goodness, I know I'm going to get fired. This is terrible." I mean, he was like almost ready to pack up his desk, right? Are you kidding? Why would we fire you? We just invested tens of thousands of dollars to teach you the best lesson you ever learned. I mean, we could have somebody else come in and do the same thing. You're never going to make that mistake again. So look at it as an investment versus, oh my word, they made a mistake. We got to get rid of them, right?
Absolutely. Dianna, the last chapter in your book, Becoming More, is about legacy. And I love that you close the book talking about legacy. Why is it important to focus on significance versus success in our lives, and to leave a positive legacy that adds value to others?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because to me, that's all we've got left. When we leave this earthly realm, what are we going to leave? And a lot of people think it's all about money, about legacy. And when you Google it, legacy, it talks about money. Yet, what is it that you're going to leave? The things that your grandkids are going to remember, the things that your children are going to remember. What did you pour into them? What did you pour into other people? And literally in chapter 5, I ask people to write out their eulogy and then reduce that down to a sentence or two as to what they want to be known for, and then live their life in a way that they will be known for that. You mentioned earlier that I work to add value to others. Well, when I wrote out my eulogy, I boiled it down to, she made a difference and added value to many people. So that's what gets me up in the morning, and that's what keeps me going, right? So I challenge anyone listening to this, write out your eulogy, reduce it down to 1 or 2 sentences, and then know that that's the legacy that you're going to live, plus whatever else you decide.
I love that. And you certainly are adding value to people and making a difference in the world. Dianna, as you know, our show is called Life Excellence. What does excellence mean to you?
Excellence to me means that you're doing the very best you can and striving to become more every day. Because my brother's excellence in walking was excellent for him. For somebody else, it was slow, too meticulous, too thought-provoking to even put the step forward. For my sister to talk to somebody else, that was not excellent. But to her, oh, it was absolutely excellent. So I would say, wherever you are in life, are you doing the best that you can, or are you just doing the best that you want to do? Is it the best that can be done? Are you striving to get better? Then I would say you're pretty excellent.
I love that. That's one of those great end of the day questions, right? Did you do your best?
That's a great
today?
Question.
Did you do your best? Dianna, how can our listeners and viewers get your book, and where can they go to learn more about you?
Well, becomingmorebook.com is the place that they can go to get bulk orders, or even to get to Amazon. It will tell you all the things that are happening. You can get resources, take the assessment, all of that. And then, of course, on Facebook, Dianna Kokoszka, Dianna with 2 N's. And then on Instagram, Dianna.Kokoszka, LinkedIn, Dianna Kokoszka. Love to have them follow me. And I just have to tell you, all the things that we've spoken about today, you are exemplary in those areas. You are someone that strives for excellence. You are someone that I have watched become more year after year. And you are someone that is adding value to everyone because of the podcasts you do and the people that you find to interview. And I just thank you so much for allowing me to be one of those people.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And of course, you're my model for all those things. So I just keep watching you, and I think, what would Dianna do, and try to emulate those things in my own way. And of course, all the contact information and information about the book we'll include in our show notes. Dianna, thank you so much for our conversation today. I appreciate you so much. I hope you know that. And I'm grateful for your willingness to come on the show.
Well, I appreciate you very much. Thank you for this great privilege.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into Life Excellence. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with others, posting about today's show with Dianna Kokoszka on social media, and leaving a rating and review. You can also learn more about me at brianbartes.com. Until next time, dream big dreams and make each day your masterpiece.